Navalalita Vayasko Nutna Lavanya Punjo Navarasa Chalachitto Nutana Prema Vitto Navanidupana-lila Kautukena-ti lau-lau Smaranigitani kunji Radhika Krishna Chandro Paramara Sarhasyanandaniksyanni Vrinda Vanavipinani kunji Divya Divya Vilasai Niravati Ramamano Radhika Krishna Chandra Bhaja Sakalam Peksha Tavaka Shastra Yukti. So, Jiva Goswami is going to retell the Bhagavata, the 10th canto, the story of Krishna's life, from the vantage point of Goloka, and what's happening in Goloka? Well, if we go to the beginning of the Gopala-champu, Radha and Krishna are there in the eternal Dham, and they've gotten married. Krishna's actually married all the gopis, and they're living there in Nanda Bhavan, and they're living their daily life in the nitya-lila. And then one day, two disciples of Narada Muni, Snigdhakanta and Madhukanta, come there to Nanda Bhavan, and they're going to recite every day Krishna Lila. They're going to put on a performance, song, dance, and storytelling, and they're going to tell the story of Krishna's prakata-lila. So, right away, this very interesting kind of situation that Jiva Goswami creates. He says that Radha and Krishna are there in the Nitya Vihar, they're in the Nitya Dham, but in that eternal pastime, they're listening to Madhukanta and Snigdhakanta tell the story of their pastimes in this world. And it's a very interesting situation. Because in the 29th chapter of the Gopala-champu1.mp4, which is a very important chapter, but throughout the Gopala-champu, there are several places where Jiva Goswami brings in a lot of siddhanta. Usually those are conversations between Purnamasi and Vrinda Devi. Purnamasi, Vrinda Devi comes and asks questions from Purnamasi, and Purnamasi explains the situation, the tattva, the siddhanta. So the 29th chapter of the Uttara-champu, this is just before Krishna returns to Vrindavan. And Vrinda and Purnamasi are talking and setting the scene for those last 6 chapters of the Uttara-champu, when all these other events that are not in the Bhagavatam are spoken of. So in other words, Jiva Goswami finds it necessary to explain these things again. He's already explained them twice, actually, in different ways. In the Purva-champu, in the 15th chapter, just before the gopis get married to other cowherds, Vrinda Devi and Purnamasi have a long conversation, and Purnamasi explains what's really going to happen. And in the 29th chapter, again, Purnamasi explains to Vrinda Devi what is going to happen, why it's going to happen that way. And then in the remaining chapters, after Krishna comes back to Vrindavan, and the gopis and Krishna get married, which is a big portion of this last section of the Bhagavatam. The whole chapter is devoted. One whole chapter is devoted to the settling of all the illusions, because the cowherd men, they're in the illusion. Manyamana suparshastan swan swan dharan brajokasa. says, Nasuya kalu krishnasya mohitastasya maya manyamana suparshastan swan swandharan rajokasa. In the end of the Bhagavata's Rasa-lila, there's a verse that says that the cowherd men, they didn't feel angry towards Krishna, even though their wives had spent one night of Brahma dancing the rasa dance with Krishna, and even though the wives had apparently abandoned them and run away in the middle of the night to meet Krishna, abandoned their service and abandoned the children and abandoned their different activities. It says that Nabhasuyam kalu krishnasya. They didn't feel angry or envious of Krishna, or didn't feel as though that he'd done something wrong. Because they'd been bewildered, mohitas tasya maya, they'd been bewildered by his maya. And being bewildered by his maya, they thought that their wives were next to them throughout the whole rasa dance. They never even thought that the wives had left them at all. And this is in the 30th chapter there of the Champu. Jiva Goswami, he makes the same argument that's found elsewhere. That, for instance, that Sita had never left Rama, or that when Ravana stole away Sita, it had never been the real Sita that went with him, but a Chaya Sita, a shadow Sita, a facsimile of the real Sita, not the real Sita. The real Sita never would go with Ravana. How could she? So Ravana could never even come near the real Sita, nor could any other man of whatever sort, even a cowherd from Krishna's own entourage, they could never be the real husbands of the gopis. The gopis are Krishna's internal potency. Ananda chinmaya sapratibhavitabhis thavirya eva nija rupataya kalapi goloka eva nivasatya kilatma bhuto govindamadi purushattamam bhajami. The gopis are Krishna's nija rupataya. They're not different from him. So how could they become the wives of any other man? That's just an impossibility. So it says that this illusion that the gopis were married to other men, this illusion that they were something other than Krishna's wives, this was terminated in there's a big scene when the goddess herself, Katyayani, appears in the midst of the cowherds and tells exactly the truth of the situation, that these gopis are not married to anybody other than Krishna, that they're the eternal consorts of Krishna. So throughout the Gopala-champu, there are these scenes where Jiva Goswami repeats the Siddhantas, where he makes it clear that according to these different evidences, whether it's from Narada Pancharatra, or whether it's from the Gautamiya Tantra, or whether it's from the Padma Purana, or whether it's from the Bhagavata itself, he's finding all these different evidences that prove two main things. One thing is that Krishna comes back to Vrindavan, and the other is that the gopis and Radha are the eternal consorts of Krishna, and that they never marry anybody else. So in the prakata-lila, when Krishna comes back to Vrindavan, then he actually marries the gopis, and then they ascend into Goloka. But in Goloka, what's happening? Well, we all know the verse that Mahaprabhu chanted in front of the Rath Yatra cart. That, he says, says that, the verse that, says that, anyway, the verse is that this is the vara, this is the same husband, this is the same man. Yah komara haraksa eva hivara Tejom Nilita Malati Surabhaya Prorhakadamba Nila Sa Chaivas Mitatapi Surata Vyapara Vidho Reva Rodasi Vetasi Tarutade Cheta Samatkantate. This is the verse that Mahaprabhu chanted in front of the Rathayatra cart. Nobody can understand except Jiva, except Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami, who had the insight into Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind. He could see what Mahaprabhu was thinking, that there in Kurukshetra, so Rupa Goswami wrote his verse, it says, Soyam Krishna Sahachari Kurukshetra Militas. But this was the way that Rupa Goswami understood the verse that Mahaprabhu was reciting. He says that this is the same Krishna that I am meeting here in Kurukshetra. And I'm meeting him here in Kurukshetra, and Sachaivas Masmi Radha. And Tadeva Sangava Sukham. I'm the same Radha. And even this pleasure of meeting him, this pleasure of seeing him here again in Kurukshetra, it's the same pleasure that I got from seeing him when we met in Vrindavan. But my mind, my heart is pining for the sound of that flute that he would play by the banks of the Kalindi. And for the love pastimes, the loving pastimes that we had in Vrindavan. So Krishnadas Kaviraj makes a huge explanation of that verse to show that Radha says that only in Vrindavan, I want Krishna in Vrindavan. I can't see Krishna. There's no possibility that the gopis could ever meet with Krishna, that the gopis could ever be united with Krishna somewhere else, in Dwarka or in Mathura even. Radharani says, Anneva Hridaya Mon, Amar Mona Vrindavan, Mona Mona Eka Korimani, Tata Tomar Padadoy Korahu Jadiudoy, Tabe Tomar Purna Kripamani. He says that my other people think that this, they call their mind, but Vrindavan, for me, Vrindavan is the same thing as my heart. Vrindavan is my soul. This is what Vrindavan is, Radharani is saying. So if you put your lotus feet into Vrindavan, then we really become reunited. But outside of my heart, how can I be united with you? It's only here that I can be united with you. So therefore it says, Tata Tomar Padadoy, Koraho Jadi Udoy, Tabe Tomar, Purna Kripamani. And I will call that then you have the fullest manifestation of your compassion and your mercy. That is your Purna Kripa. Now, at the end of this 31st or 32nd chapter there in the Gopala-champu, the same verse is quoted. Jiva Goswami quotes the very same verse. That somehow or another, there's something going on in the prakata-lila that is absent even from the nitya-lila.